Hi, and welcome to the Libertarian Atheist Skypecast. Today is Sunday, December 25th, 2016, and we have Jeremy, Adam, Betsy, and Heather. Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hello.
Howdy.
Merry Christmas to our Christian listeners.
Yes, Merry Christmas to you.
To zero, all zero of them.
All zero of them.
Happy holidays.
All right, Merry Kwanzaa. Christmas Kwanzaa, isn't that what... I've heard that one before, so...
Happy late Festivus.
All right,
Yeah,
so
that's the
today
best.
we're going to finish talking about the Christopher Hitchens video that we started last week, so we'll go ahead and finish that up today. So we'll let Jeremy get
I
that.
believe we got
queued
about
up here.
halfway through it. It was a top
Yeah, I
10
can't
list.
remember.
It was a top 10 list, and we are about halfway through. I'll just have to get everything queued up. Now, we had a snafu on the recording of that, correct?
Yeah, for some reason I
Oh,
think...
there was.
Yeah, I think I forgot to save it correctly after we went to save it, and so I wasn't able... I didn't get any sound on the recording, so I'll make sure not to do it this time. But we still got the other three that are up on YouTube, so...
Now, with that being said, were there any points that anyone can remember that we'd want to kind of... we kind of do a refresher on before we jump into the last half of this video?
It depends on where we left off. I remember that he said, I have my notes here, when you look at Israeli settlers paid for often by American tax dollars, deciding if they can steal enough land from other people and get all the Jews into the promised land and the non-Jews out of it, then finally the Jewish people will be worthy of the return of the Messiah. So it made me think, it's too bad Hitchens wasn't a libertarian, because imagine having someone of his caliber on our political side, as well as our, secularly rational side. Would have been great, but he had problems with folks like Ayn Rand, but he did give up Marxism evenently. And
So I didn't
so
realize
was a
that.
good thing.
He was a Marxist, basically.
I think he had Marxist leanings at one time, and then he renounced it, and that was good.
Well, given his age and involvement in academia, I would not be surprised if probably early on in his career he had,
In that era, right.
was sympathetic towards Marxist ideology, as in a lot of graduate students and
And especially in Europe, in Europe, and
yeah.
I mean, it was here too.
I would not be surprised, yes, if as he was working on his degrees, he probably was sympathetic towards Marxism. Extremely competent.
And the other thing I wanted to mention, I think we got past this. This was at the 750 mark, that they talked about the body count between theocracies, democracies, and communist states. And it really amounts to just a pissing contest. The only thing that counts is democide. That's it. I mean, how many people died under whatever form of government?
Yeah.
I mean, you can get bogged down in the numbers where, religion killed this many,
Right.
and communism killed this many, and fascism killed this many. It's a red herring.
It is, yeah. It's still something though that I guess if you want to call it the new atheists cling to, and by new atheists I think that's pretty much generally agreed upon, and being as atheists neoliberals, which are different from atheist progressive liberals. Atheist progressive liberals are the SJW types. The neoliberals are more of the pragmatic,
Like Sam Harris.
pragmatic, yeah, Sam Harris, pragmatic, pro-West.
Sure.
Really hard on things like Islam.
Yep.
And
Would you say that neoliberals will renounce regressive leftists?
they do.
Is that part of it?
Typically, they do. Yes. It's you know, I mean, if you're going to kind of split up the left into two factions, it'd probably be you know, the neoliberals and I mean, that's kind of a term that I've seen used principally by you know, Marxists and communists to describe kind of this you know, the pragmatic liberals who are, you know, they're probably, you know, they're generally in favor of things like a welfare state, but they're still pro capitalism. That's kind of the political, you know. I mean, and that, yeah, Sam Harris today or Christopher Hitchens, when he was alive, was definitely part of that camp.
And I think, like you and I, Adam, have talked about Dave Rubin and kind of gone back and forth of where he stands, and I think he's coming from that neoliberal position slowly over to being more libertarian. Because the more I listen to him, you know, week after week, I do see more and more he's coming out of that.
Has he had any big name libertarian guests on recently?
Not that I can really. A lot of them I haven't recognized. They're people that are not super famous. I'll have to look back and see who it is, because I get mixed up on who's on whose podcast, because I listen to several different ones.
Right. Gosh, I'm looking forward to a time when I have more time to do that stuff.
I know, it really is.
I miss reading and doing that kind of stuff, but my life is just so hectic. It's like,
well, you know, how far a drive do you have to work?
Actually, my job is like literally like just a couple blocks away, but in the morning I have to drive, you know, Ava to before and after school care. And then after work, I got to drive and pick her up and then pick up Jeremy. So I actually don't get home till like an hour and 15 minutes after I get off work.
She could walk if she really wanted to and had the time to do so. So
yeah, if I didn't have to
I listen to my podcast I put them on my iPod and just listen.
Right.
To
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
I just have one that's running all the time, and if I go to the grocery store, I'll hear 10 minutes of it. It's kind of all chopped up, but I always just listen to that in the car.
Yeah, I
audio
started
is the
doing
one
these,
thing you can do when you're doing something else. You can't do that with video or a book.
Right.
No, I know. I'm on my lunch break. I get an hour for lunch, so I've been watching these little econ videos. They're kind of interesting. So when I get through those, I'll have to find something else to do. But anyway, I think Jeremy might have us queued up.
Ready?
yeah, I believe we picked up. I think we got through 6. We'd be starting off with item number 5 out of the. So this is 5 all the way down to number 1 on the list of the top 10 times Christopher Hitchens was a professional mind blower.
All right.
So
Do you know where we are in the time code?
15 minutes 13 seconds is where I see.
So we're away. Okay.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes left.
Okay, so go ahead here.
The most finished example, the most perfected one, the most ruthless and refined one, that of National Socialism. The one that fortunately allowed the escape of all these great atheist thinkers and many others to the United States,
Well,
country
one
with
finish out and
separation
go
of
into
church
that
and
one.
state that gave them welcome. If it's an atheistic regime, then how come that in the first chapter of Mein Kampf, Hitler says he's doing God's work and executing God's will in destroying the Jewish people? How come the Führer oath that every officer of the party and the army had to take, making Hitler into a minor god, begins, I swear in the name of Almighty God, my loyalty to the Führer? How come that on the belt buckle of every Nazi soldier it says Gott mit uns, God on our side? How come that the first treaty made by the National Socialist dictatorship, the very first, is with the Vatican, exchanging political control of Germany for Catholic control of German education? How come that the churches celebrated the birthday of the Führer every day, every year, on that day, until democracy put an end to this filthy, quasi-religious, superstitious, barbarous, reactionary system? Again, this is not a difference of emphasis between us to suggest that there's something fascistic about me and my beliefs is something I won't hear said, and you shouldn't believe. Thank you.
So that was actually where we left off, and I think we did discuss pretty much at length.
We did.
Basically, him dismantling people accusing atheists of being some sort of authoritarian that wants to control people's religious beliefs. And
Yep.
he very succinctly described how that's not at all true. So, so now we'll go on to number 5 and then finish out the video.
Supernatural claims must be true, or none of them are, my own position, or only one of them is. The least probable position of all. Right. The one you've decided to occupy.
You asked me.
I was asking how on what you found. Your assertion that yours is the only true bill.
The ones I believe in, the ones I believe in are the ones I believe in.
Yes. For example, why are your miracles the true bill and the others are all copies of it?
Because they happened. And I believe that Joseph, when he found out that Mary, his betrothed, was pregnant, he followed David Hume's advice to the letter. And he didn't know what the most reasonable explanation was. And that sort of thing. It's not that in the ancient world, it's not that people didn't know where babies came from. It's
No, all Joseph knew was who hadn't made her pregnant.
right.
If we have to be crude about this.
Correct.
And if you were David Hume, you would ask, which is more likely, that the fact that he hasn't made her pregnant and she is the result of divine intervention, or that a Jewish girl could tell a fib?
Sure. And Joseph.
Now, of the two, I don't think the latter is overwhelmingly improbable. No religion has ever been founded except with the claim that its founder and prophet was born of a virgin. I have the whole list in the front of my book, if anyone. By the way, available at fine bookstores everywhere. I have in the first 2 pages of my book, listen, there is no religion from Aztec to Hindu, including Buddhism, where the Gautama is born through a slit in his mother's side, where it doesn't begin with a miraculous birth.
And there's no counterfeit money.
You couldn't be in the religion business without claiming that, especially in the greater Jerusalem area.
Nobody counterfeits brown Safeway shopping bags. They're not worthwhile. It's not worth it to counterfeit them. If something's worthwhile, you've got to.
Nobody bothers to counterfeit bad currency. Well, it turns out that they do.
But not currency.
It turns out that things, the ironies of history, and the cruelties that reality practice on us as a suffering species. Yes, actually, people will go to great lengths to say, I'd like to deal in this bankrupt currency. It can happen, and it has, as you've just shown.
That I want to start by saying that the guy that Hitchens was debating was completely incoherent. I'm not sure what points he was bringing to defend his position. Really, it was
Right.
Most people, Hitchens debates are incoherent.
Compared to him,
That's relative to, Hitchens. I mean,
I think he was trying to say on that counterfeit thing that
I'm not even sure what.
they were all taking the theme of the virgin birth of Jesus and counterfeiting it. Like they believe that Satan masquerades as an angel of light. Like anything you see that mimics what Christianity does, that's counterfeit. Mm-hmm. Even though Christianity didn't have an original idea in its head.
Not to mention it was one of the last religions,
In terms of modern religions, it's probably okay. Let's just I don't know. Say we have a top 10 list of world religions. I think Christianity would probably be about the third, maybe fourth at the most newest.
Yeah,
ahead of Christianity, you have Islam and Sikhism and anything else. Hinduism, no, goes back to the Stone Ages, though.
Yeah.
What's newer than Christianity besides Sikhism and Islam?
Huh.
Probably.
certain forms of Christianity,
Right.
like Mormonism.
Right.
Some people would say Mormons are not Christians. I don't buy that argument.
Right,
but
that's true.
Christian Scientology.
Scientology. I don't know.
They like to, yeah.
Yeah, they believe in something completely
Universalists
different.
too,
So.
but they,
Yeah.
right? Universalists, people say that they're not Christians either.
I guess I'm getting at, probably the top 10 most practiced religions around the world, and Scientology and Universalism would not probably be in that list, but
But they also don't, Scientology, I don't think, has a virgin birth story, does it? It's got some bizarre space story.
Right.
L. Ron Hubbard, it isn't really.
We're reincarnations of aliens from 80 trillion years ago, which is quite a few times older than the age of the universe. But the point is, what is he saying by other religions counterfeiting, ripping off, whatever, Christianity, when Christianity is one of the last ones to arrive on the scene?
Exactly, yeah. It's so illogical. It makes no sense.
They just lacked imagination. Imagine if you were trying to formulate a religion today. Well, you couldn't get it off the ground because of science, because religion had a 4,000-year head start on science.
Yeah.
But if you were just to play a game, you could come up with better things to assure that no one would discover the shell game, or it would be more difficult. Let's put it that way. It would be much more difficult to unravel the shell game today, because you would not go down the road of these outlandish claims that they did 2,000 years ago, or 1,500 years ago. You'd stay away from that, because everybody would just
roll their eyes, pretty much.
Right,
Yeah.
and the jig would be up.
Well, people were a lot
So
more
you stay
superstitious
away.
back then, and then nowadays
Yeah.
people just rely on faith. They know there's no real scientific way they can, prove that God exists, so they rely on faith and
personal experience.
and
They just
appealing to
always
people's
fall-
weaknesses. All those things that help perpetuate religion.
The bad thing about science in terms of swaying people away from religion is the field of science is so vast and so varied, and each discipline of science is so specific and bogged down in technical details that it's really hard for any layperson to get an understanding of science. So when people say that if people only understood science, religion would go away, I don't know. That's not true. I mean, because just the understanding of science.
Because it hasn't.
No.
Well, and,
Yeah,
and, and
there are
human,
scientists.
and the human condition too. I mean, people it's hard for a lot of people to think that when they die, that's it. They don't. It's too hard for them to wrap their minds around that. They don't want to think that that's it.
Well, I mean, it's like saying if only everybody learned computer programming, then businesses like Geek Squad would go bankrupt. Well, most people don't want to spend the time and effort it takes to learn computer programming, so that they can repair difficult problems with their computers themselves. They're just going to call whatever repair service they prefer, and that's the same problem with science. Science is there's so much technical information that the layperson doesn't understand, and it's not a good tool to dismantle religious belief.
And it doesn't explain why we're here either. Not really. And that's
Right.
that's also the other big age-old issue.
Well, maybe not
that-
dismantle it, but you could not start Judaism today. You could not start Christianity today. I don't see how it would get off the ground.
I don't think
I mean,
so.
I'm talking about exactly like it was. You write the same words,
Right.
same book, same
Think of the Old
farce.
I mean, how
all of
ridiculous
that.
the Old Testament is, and if you tried to put that out as a serious historical or any kind of a document that you're supposed to take seriously, people would just roll their eyes.
Yeah, they would laugh.
It might make a good
Also, if
fantasy
death
novel.
didn't exist, if death didn't exist, religion would never have the influence that it has enjoyed over the centuries.
Okay, so we'll go to the next item here on the list.
In other words, we don't particularly welcome the idea of the annihilation either of ourselves or of the entropic heat death of the universe. We don't like the idea. But there's a good deal of evidence to suggest that that is what's going to happen. And there's very, very little evidence to suggest that I'll see you all again in some theme park. There's absolutely no evidence for that at all. So I'm willing to accept, on the evidence, conclusions that may be unwelcome to me. I'm sorry if I sound as if I'm spelling that out. Probably about 180,000 years ago, an appalling global warming crisis occurred. And the estimate is that the number of humans in Africa went down to between 40 and 30,000. This close to joining every other species that had gone extinct. There's a certain arrogance to this assumption that all of this extraordinary development was all about us. The tremendous wastefulness of it, the tremendous cruelty of it, the tremendous caprice of it, the tremendous tinkering and incompetence of it. Never mind, at least we're here. The whole universe was designed with just you in mind. There's no claim I know how to make that says atheism is true, because atheism is the statement that a certain proposition isn't true. So I wish you'd get this bit right. But I would say, yes, I think we have free will. When asked why I think so, I would have to take refuge in philosophical irony and say, because I don't think we have any choice but to have free will. But the Christian answer is, of course you have free will. The boss insists upon it.
Okay, so I do want to say that Hitchens kind of dismantled my last argument that science is probably not the best way to sway people away from religion. I mean, on specific topics it is, but...
Right.
Right.
Science is a huge category.
It is, and it doesn't explain, like I said, a lot of the, it
Origins.
doesn't always appeal to human emotion, and that's the,
Yeah.
that's the part you have to try.
The
and
point
bridge,
is,
so, yeah.
science on its own is not going to be the death of religion.
Well,
Absolutely
and science isn't always perfect either, so
No, I think it's going to destroy itself as it is now from within.
Yep.
Right.
That's
Religion,
its
right.
biggest detriment
It
right now.
is.
People leaving the church,
And the
people
young people-
thinking for themselves.
Right, like just this next generation, like we've talked about before, is not going to have the number of religious young people that my generation did, or the one before mine.
Yeah.
So
I know
It's just gonna be-
my best friend ever since I was a kid. He's always been very religious, and but we're always very accepting of each other. But just here, in October or so, he told me, he's like, well, don't tell anybody, but I don't believe anymore. And I'm like, what?
Really?
I know. I was blown away. I mean, I just never expected it because he's always been like, even just as recently, was very, very much believing in God, and it was just really kind of. I was like, well, cool, But now he seems to be more open about it. Like he just
He needs to get on the podcast.
he's not a libertarian though. He's definitely a hardcore Democrat, but
Yeah.
he's not an SJW.
He
So-
would be a
That's
neoliberal.
okay. We could get him on just for the religious side.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is fascinating when somebody that committed.
Yeah, I should see if he wants to join in the podcast sometime. So
It's just I mean he doesn't want to abandon the church because that's a big part of his social circle.
well, yeah, he still goes because it really is. He's always been very kind of antisocial, and for him, church. He found like he started going to the what the heck is the Metropolitan Community Church, which is LGBTQ friendly. So, and he's gay. So for him, that was like a good way for him to meet other people when he moved here. And so
Sure.
he's got this whole community. So he still goes to church every week, because I think he likes the camaraderie. So
Sure, it's a big part of it is the social. I mean, I'm convinced that many people that routinely go to church, I mean, maybe not the hardcore fundamentalist churches, but your mainline churches and that, preach the Bible but are not super rigid. I'm convinced that they're social connections because these people, a lot of them don't walk around spouting the Bible off all week long, but they
Right.
still would
Really.
call themselves Christians and
I know.
yeah, and his church is actually pretty cool. I've gone, like, they'll have like these little get-togethers in the basement, and every time I'll go with him, they all know I'm an atheist. They don't care, and they all
Yeah.
get drunk and sit around with the trans people getting drunk
And that's
in the
not
church.
a mainstream church. I mean, that is clearly not,
Right.
that's
Really though, I mean even in mainstream churches, and I recall growing up in Catholic church, if I I was always very curious when I asked questions, and I knew that, I mean, even some of the people that volunteered for our church, chaperoning or being a Sunday school teacher for children's programs, I really got a strong sense that at the least some of those people were probably de facto agnostic. Okay, well this is the church that my family's been going to for generations, and I'm going to go here too, and I mean, I don't.
It's tradition. It's
Yeah.
more just religious tradition.
I don't. When I'm not at church, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it, and I'm not
Right.
sure. And I definitely don't believe all of it to be true. But yeah, it's the community. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, people are social animals, and
Yeah.
Sure. I found most of the Catholics that I know are like that. I mean, not very many of them are super, like, really get into the saint worship and all the ritual that they can do on their own at home.
Yeah.
Most of the ones I've ever known didn't do any of that. They just went, their kids went through the training and their communions and all that stuff, but it was kind of more just for the ritual and the social.
Catholicism is unique among Christian sects. I mean, probably Catholicism and Orthodoxy are very much about tradition. I mean, tradition is almost ahead of the theology.
That's right.
And
Yep.
and that's why, I mean, so many people stay loyal to it and stay involved.
Well, and that's why people like Tony Soprano can go to church and have no problem.
Right.
Accepted. Yeah. I mean, it has nothing to do with how you live the rest of your life.
Yep, exactly.
My cousin has adopted Orthodox Judaism, and she says a lot of it is due to the community. And
Really?
my response is, that's really not a community I want to be part of. I'm not going to have a whole lot in common with the Orthodox Jewish community.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very familiar with them, and it's just not for me. I mean,
Well, yeah, and Orthodoxy is really conservative, always, no matter what religion you're from.
Yeah,
so.
it's beyond conservative. I was raised in a conservative sect of Judaism. That the Orthodox are way out there.
Mm-hmm. They always are.
Is that what Ivanka Trump is in? Didn't she convert to Judaism? Donald Trump's daughter, and she married a Jewish guy?
Oh, that's right. She did marry. No,
but I don't know
I'm
what.
sure she's not. I'm sure she's not Orthodox.
Yeah, I was going to say she's a
It
Jew.
might be.
That's why they were
Might
so
be conservative,
they were
but
laughing when they were calling him like an anti-Semite. Well, his daughter is now a Jew.
Yeah, she probably wouldn't be able to marry into that family if it was an Orthodox Jewish
That's right,
family.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that wouldn't be done.
Anyway,
Nope.
okay.
All right, so we're actually getting close to the end of this video here, so let's go to the next segment.
Okay.
Why is it that the Islamic country, Iran, is the threat to peace in the world and not the Zionist? Is it America's support of Israel? Well, hundreds of people are getting killed in Gaza and West Bank every day with the support of America. The Israel-Palestinian war has been going on for 61 years, and we are not actually looking at what is actually happening, and we're fearing about what is not happening. We're fearing about something that hasn't happened.
Mr. Hitchens, it's become a familiar thing. I should perhaps preface this by saying that with Edward Said, the late Professor Edward Said, I wrote a book about the rights of Palestinians and the way in which these have been negated by Israeli policy. But I know a lot of people in the Arab and Muslim world who are fed up with having the subject changed to Israel whenever human rights for them comes up. A very good example of this just last week in Tehran, where the government has an official Al-Quds Day, as it's called, the Day of Jerusalem, where school children and others are paraded. It's a more or less compulsory demonstration to say they'll give their blood and their lives for Palestine. And hundreds of thousands of Iranians turned up to say, no, we'll only give our blood for Iran, thanks. We're fed up with being told by the regime that they represent the oppressed of Palestine, that we can't talk. And they are having to shed their blood, because the regime keeps on killing them for wanting to have a say in their own internal affairs. And a regime that does this has just pulled off a blood-stained military coup that's overturned the results even of an already predeterminedly fraudulent election, that says that that a woman's voice is worth that of only, it takes 3 women in a court against 1 man, that uses torture and rape as policies in prison and so forth. You want a regime like that to have nuclear weapons? You're welcome. But you should say that's what you don't mind. Are you going to say that? Are you going to say you've no objection? That the real problem is the Jewish state? Come on, be serious.
So the Jewish state doesn't have nuclear weapons? Is that what you're saying?
Well, now, I appeal again to the fair-mindedness and intelligence of the audience. Did I say that?
No, but
Did I in any way imply it?
No, but...
No. Did I not begin with a throat clearing, which I'll amplify about my long record of work about this, my defense of the Israeli dissidents who published the news about Israel's illegal program and gone to jail for it. I can refer you to all that if you like. But my point was directed specifically to you. Yeah. I said, does this, in your mind, make the destruction of human rights in Islamic countries okay or not?
No.
Good.
Okay, no, let's hear from Waleed.
Well, that's progress of the kind.
So there's something interesting there.
I wasn't quite sure I followed what he was.
He's as slick as a Philadelphia lawyer.
Yes.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is
I was trying to gain the whole.
one of the biggest. I was kind of gleaning something was going on there. Was one of Hitchens' biggest criticisms against him is he's an Islamophobe, and I think he was making a more nuanced argument, because he mentioned that he acknowledged the human rights abuses of the state of Israel. he was specifically critiquing Iran and not Islamic culture as a whole.
Right.
So basically, what I got from that, and it would probably be best to watch the entire exchange.
Right.
But basically, what he was saying is, if we're ranking, nation-state regimes for being evil, you could probably put Iran higher on the list of evil ahead of Israel.
Well, and he was basically saying too, I mean, from what I gathered, that he was saying that basically the people of Iran were washing their hands of Palestine. Like, they weren't going to, be responsible for whatever they were suffering through.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yeah. And then he put it back on her because she was all kind of holier than thou,
Well, yeah, and then what you do? Pull up the straw man about nuclear weapons, and it's like,
yes.
that was never even mentioned.
They don't have it?
Yeah, that was never even mentioned.
And the Arab states have been abandoning the Palestinians, certainly since Arafat's death.
Mm-hmm.
What year? I wonder what year that exchange took place. Like, how long? I don't know enough about the history of all this Middle East stuff to kind of be able to pinpoint what you.
Well, and Israel's pretty powerful.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the lobby is very powerful.
Mm-hmm. So I think even they don't want to. I think that's probably why they don't mess with Israel that much, because they know how much power that they have.
Yeah, and turning their attention on you.
Yep, definitely.
But Hitchens just is amazing to listen to, how he can just do that. Just with no preparation. His brain just was amazing.
He's on. He's sharp as a tack and quick as a wit. Just right on top of it. Mm-hmm.
Going back to the free will paradox that he mentioned, that God had no choice but to give humans free will.
He insisted upon it.
I've mentioned that to believers. I've said that. Well, then God didn't have a choice? It does stop some of them in their tracks. They have to think about that.
Yeah.
Because they've never considered it. They've never thought about it in that way.
All right, and wow, I guess it looks like we're about the end of the video. Let's see what the last 20 seconds holds for us here. Oh, the last 20 seconds is just subscribe to our channel, yada yada yada. So that was the whole thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So anything that we'd like to do to summarize what we've discussed here?
I just have 2 points from earlier in the video.
Yeah.
A wonderful quote of his: "Civility is overrated." I love that one. And then soon afterward, when he mentions that Jesus could have been a little mentally ill, and we got into this in the last podcast a little bit.
Was that in an earlier part? I don't remember that.
Yeah, that was the earlier part where he said, well, that Jesus either had to be...
Oh, yes.
He had to either think that the world was going to end right then, or he was a lunatic.
Didn't he invoke C.S. Lewis on that? Wasn't that about C.S. Lewis? Yeah, okay.
And, we've had Gandhi and Martin Luther King, both very religious men who preach peace. Yet, neither one of them were as far out as Jesus is portrayed in the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
So, you could have had a figure, again, if the Bible had been written today by people who were much more logical and a little more creative and
right.
So you could have had a less crazy Jesus. You could have had a more like a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi.
I just had a funny mental image of crazy Jesus.
Well, there's been plenty of them.
Wouldn't that be like the South Park Jesus? That would be awesome.
Yeah, he's pretty sane, actually. He's pretty even keeled. And
yeah,
he
he's got his
tell
shit
you,
together.
look, leave your mother and father and your family and follow me.
Yep. See, a lot of Christians now, they don't get that whole concept. I've talked about that before in the past, about how Jesus actually preached for you to leave your family behind because they weren't important. The Word of God was important, but you'd never see anybody actually do such a thing now.
And well, except in Scientology they do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every cult has within it built a separation from a support system, and it's vital for success to separate you from your former support system.
Absolutely.
And it points to me that the cult of Christianity, the original Christianity, that is a trait of a cult, is to tell you that your family doesn't matter.
Certainly. Origins of Christianity do seem to be like a cult.
What?
The origins of Christianity do seem to be cultish, yes.
They really, following a charismatic leader, you could go down the list of, compare him to Jim Jones, and he's not far off. I mean, just give me everything you have, the whole thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's why cults could springboard off of the Bible and gain control of people forever. I mean, there's always been those. They're all alike. That's why I just don't get why Christians cannot compare what they believe to other belief systems and see that there isn't that much difference.
But it's just not with.
It's not what they want.
That's not only with Christianity, though. Again, getting back to my Orthodox cousin, I mean, she will rail against Catholicism and say how crazy the rituals are, but she can't see her own faith and how just as nutty that is. I mean, for every nutty thing that she accuses Catholicism of practicing, I can name one for Orthodox Judaism.
Exactly.
I know exactly what you mean. I mean, not as far as from the perspective of an Orthodox Jew, but from from the viewpoint of, I guess, from evangelical Christianity, a lot of evangelical Christians see Catholicism as being strange in that way. Some of them actually, I mean, the more fundamentalist, evangelical Christian sects view Christianity as being satanic, actually.
Catholicism is satanic.
Yeah, Catholicism is being
Right.
satanic.
Right. No, I agree.
Oh, yeah,
That's because they're the ones who created the whole Satanism myth. Actually,
yeah,
they're the ones who created the whole to vilify paganism. They're the ones who actually created this whole idea of Satanism and all these rituals. So it's actually the Catholics that did it.
But I mean, yeah, I've talked to evangelical Christians, and they've asked me, it's like, well, what religion are you? And like, well, I'm an atheist. Like, well, you're always atheist? Like, no, I was raised Catholic. And like, well, that explains it, because Catholicism is basically Satanism. And then how do you figure that? Oh, because of all the ritual and the burning of the incense, which is like, something that they do on Easter. Not all the time, but,
At funerals they do.
the idea that drinking wine is the same as drinking blood and all this and that. And, and then, I'm thinking, it's like, well, isn't it in your religion? Don't you believe that you speak in tongues?
Exactly.
And, I mean, so
let's not forget those graven images.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's all, but there's just something in your mind that blocks out your own hypocrisy, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. It does.
We all do that. I mean, we all have to guard against that. And if we take any kind of a firm stand.
Right. I'm sure I did it when I was a believer. I'm sure I did it.
I thought Catholics were going to hell when I was a fundamentalist. But it's just...
So, Adam, I remember you mentioning last time you wanted to kind of, I guess since this is the Christmas Day podcast, you kind of wanted to have a discussion about our personal journeys and how we came to all arrive at being Christians, no, atheist libertarians.
Well, actually, I wanted to take the religious side, more than the political side.
Right.
But we could do the political side another time, but so often they're not fused together. I was a libertarian before I gave up my belief in an intervening God.
And I'm the opposite. I I gave up my religion before I became a libertarian, so it's interesting.
Same here.
But it's the personal stories that I find just so fascinating.
Yeah.
That journey. How do you get from there to here?
Right. I just joined a Facebook group called Recovering Ex-Christians, and it is, I mean, most of them are liberals, and they do veer into politics sometimes, and I've just started blocking those posts so I don't get mad. But it's really interesting. A lot of them are just brand new, like they just left the church and became, disenchanted with it, or, I mean, we're talking like weeks or months before. They're brand new, like leaving, and it's just amazing to watch that. I forgot what that was like because it's been like 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And how hard it is. A lot of them are coming up against their entire families, all their social systems. Some of them are in marriages, obviously, where one is still a fundamentalist, and they're now saying we're probably going to have to end up getting divorced. But it's fascinating to just, and it's all, most of it is kind of like therapy. Like people are helping each other who have been out longer, and it's just an interesting.
It is very traumatizing for a lot of people.
Really
it's
is.
almost like getting off of substance abuse or alcohol or drug abuse.
The addictive withdrawal kind of feeling. Some of them were saying, like, this is my first Christmas not being a Christian. I don't know what to do with myself. I mean, things like that where they're just lost.
Right. They're so used to that. And, I know how tough it is with family. It's like, I think I've been an atheist since I was a teenager. I just couldn't express it for the longest time, and I finally had to duke it out with both of my parents, because it's like, they knew, but like I think they just wanted to put their little blinders up and pretend like either it wasn't happening or someday I'd come back to the fold. So,
why don't you start and tell us your story, Heather?
I knew somewhere probably around junior high that I just didn't believe this whole God thing. But my dad made me go to church every single week, and so I just, you kind of got used to it. But as soon as, of course, I graduated high school on my own, then I just never went to church again. So, but I had a couple moments where life got really tough. I think in my 20s, a couple of times where I kind of wanted to turn back to belief in God. I think just because I just, like when I left my son's dad, I went through the worst summer of my life. I left him, and then he called the police on me, and they told me I had to turn over my kid, and I had to do all this stuff, and I think I had run to Texas to stay with my mom, and it was a really awful summer. It was just horrible, and I can remember just thinking, I kind of had that moment where I thought maybe I, didn't know what else to do, and so I went to church one Sunday with William, and then I'm like, you know what, this is just as stupid bullshit that I remember it to be, so So I left there, and I've always told my dad and my mom both that I was an atheist, but they just kind of smile and nod, like they just didn't really want to talk about it. And then every time I'd go home and they would say grace for something, because my parents aren't married, so they live in separate places. But when I'd visit them, they'd always say grace, and I just wouldn't, participate in that. So, well then, good old Facebook. One winter, I went up to go see my dad for Christmas, and this is actually when I decided I wasn't going to go home for Christmas anymore. Because I went up there, and my stepmom was all upset because my dad's sister-in-law, his brother's wife, had called and talked to my stepmom and told her about these anti-religious posts I had made on Facebook. And so she was all cold and distant, and I didn't know why. And so my dad and I went to go take a hike, and I asked my dad, I said, what's wrong with Mary? And he was like, he goes, he told me what happened, so, and she was all upset, So it started this big firestorm, and my dad and I got in this big argument. I was just like, I'm like, it doesn't really matter. And so, I ended up just leaving. And I went home, and I thought about it, and I got really upset. So I sent my aunt a Facebook message, and I blasted her. And I was like, you need to stay out of my business. you don't need to be starting shit with my dad and my stepmom, so I unfriended her, and we haven't been friends since. So then I got mad. I sent my dad this big long email, and I was like, I was upset. And I'm just like, you don't have to like it, but you have to accept it because I'm an adult, and that's just the way it is. So and we didn't talk much for a few months, and then we just kind of, we went ahead and just got over it, and my mom was kind of the same way. My grandma got all upset one time, but, you just kind of deal with it. I'm like, well, you'll just have to accept it. So.
But you don't really discuss it, right? I mean, you don't.
Well, I mean, I'm open about it. Like, I'll be like, yeah, I had this, I had this event, or like
Right.
I talk about the Skypecast, and my dad's like, "Oh, what's it
Yeah.
about?" And I'm like, "Oh, Libertarian Atheist Group." They're like, "Oh, okay." That's all they say, just like, "Oh, okay." But we don't, That's
good.
They
So
don't
the
ask me
outcome, at
anything
least,
detailed.
was that you were able to. They were not just rejecting you totally. I mean,
Right. Like I think
that's what was so
they really understand now that I'm an atheist. So yeah.
But you don't get into details with them. You don't sit down and reason it out with them. And
like say, let's instead of watching It's a Wonderful Life, let's listen to Christopher Hitchens tonight.
Oh, no, my dad would never go for that. My dad, he's very, very religious and very conservative. My dad was the guy who voted for Trump, so
Right.
so
Also
we just leave, for the most part, we leave religion and politics off the table because we don't agree on either.
Right. What denominational background are they?
Lutheran.
Okay.
Yep. Raised Lutheran.
but would you say you have a good relationship with them, or
Yeah, I do. My dad and I
friendly and-
my dad and I are close because my parents split up when I was 4, and my dad raised me for many years all by himself. He didn't get remarried till after I graduated high school, but right after I graduated high school. So him and I, we've always been really close. So I mean, we've butted heads a couple times in my adult life, I think, when I've, but yeah,
That's normal.
yeah, we're still close. We talk once a week, and
Yeah, that's great.
yeah. My mom and I,
well,
we're
it's
really not
also
that close,
that generation too, and I'm sure you understand that.
Mm-hmm.
That if,
I do.
If it were another generation, a generation younger, a generation or two, it might be quite different.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I know my dad has talked about how when he was in college for a while, he was a Democrat. And then he said that was the dumbest thing he ever did. So, and then I know he was an atheist for a while. So we've never
Really?
talked about it. Yeah, because I remember when I was real young, he would always make me go to church with my grandma, but he never ever went. And then all of a sudden, somewhere, like when I was probably late junior high, he started going to church every Sunday. So, and he kind of... And my uncle mentioned it. He said something about my dad at the time he was an atheist. So I kind of put 2 and 2 together, but I've never discussed it with my dad because, I just...
That's interesting, though. You wonder what happened. You must wonder what happened.
Yeah.
Was there some event or some revelation that, somehow an experience he had that all of a sudden made him believe again?
Yeah, because, there was nothing,
Like
traumatic.
traumatic.
There was nothing traumatic that happened, so I don't know if he just had a personal thing with it, I'm not really sure, but I know he was an atheist for a while, so I always curious about that, but I'm like, I don't want to bring up that conversation with my dad.
Pandora's box again.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, you have to wonder why people come back to religion. It might be that they really weren't an atheist. I don't know. I'm not familiar with your dad's story, but
Could be an
some
agnostic.
people, I think they claim to be, but I think that they still hold on to an intervening God, even if they give up everything else. There's something in them that won't let go of that.
Right.
It's like they're more agnostic than atheist.
I mean, when an apologist for religion says that, oh, you're just mad at God, that's why you think you're an atheist, that's probably true for some people. Some people say, they just get mad at all the injustice in the world they see, and they see how prayers aren't being answered, and they see all the death and suffering in the world, and think, how can God let this happen? That's it, I'm an atheist, I'm mad. And then, but then they don't ever apply the logical thought to that.
That's right. It's an emotional response.
Yeah.
Or something bad happens, like their child dies, or, some terrible significant event happens, and then they just can't believe anymore, but then they come back because they didn't really, like you said, logically
Think about
decide
it.
that it was just an irrational thought. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, no God to praise means no God to get angry at.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I know for me, I think what really cemented the idea that I was an atheist was when the first time I ever heard of some really extreme, child abuse story. And, I can remember how how deep it just struck within me. And I thought, if there was a God, why the fuck would he let something like this happen? It was just it was a horrific story. And I'm like, just a little tiny baby practically. And I was like, I'm like, and then I had a friend one time trying to say, well, God has a reason for everything. I'm like, for what? What fucking reason would they have for this?
Yeah, the umbrella excuse.
I know. I'm just like, but there's no reason for that. It doesn't make any sense. And then you see, And you see all the injustice in the world. You see, you know, little girls get sold into sex slavery in Asia, or, you know, kids get sold for body parts in Africa, and it's just like, okay, there's no God. They're just, you know,
what is it, every 15 seconds?
Oh, yeah.
Every 15 seconds a child dies?
Years ago, I told a friend of mine, I said, you know, if there is a God, he does not give a shit about you. So, because he just doesn't care. I mean, like, why would he let these things happen, you know? How could you? You know?
Absolutely.
There's a much more quick, easy, painless method to die.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Many people arrive at their atheism through the realization of human suffering. Bart Ehrman did. That's how he got there.
Yeah.
He just, one day, he just started to think about all the tragedy in the world, and needless tragedy, tragedy against innocent people. You could say, well, adults, they might have sinned, but you can't use that excuse with innocent babies.
No, you can't.
Infants, 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan Barker always says all you have to do to become an atheist is to walk through the cancer ward of a children's hospital.
That too.
There just is no, and yet you find that the parents of those kids are just, some of them are just so unbelievably religious, and then the child dies and they still cling to it, and I don't get that.
Yeah, I think they just,
relate to
I think
that.
they're just so desperate at that point, they're going to cling to that even stronger than they were before, because they just,
Right.
you know, it's like when people come out of their surgery okay, and they're like, oh, thank Jesus, or I'm like, well, Jesus had nothing to do with it. Thank the doctor who saved your life, you know?
Yeah, Jesus got credit for one of my good deeds.
Right?
Week. Some old man was walking through the health club with his little walker going to the track, and he dropped his mittens and his hat and his scarf. And so I saw it after, like, it was all strewn on the floor there. So I picked him up and I went and looked for him, and I found him and I gave him back. And what does he say? Oh, praise God. And I almost said, I am not God, you effer.
I would have said, you're welcome, my son. Yeah, you should have said, you're welcome, my son. Time to go perform some more miracles. I got to walk on water now. Have a good day.
And then I said, well, do you think God was a woman? Well, she is. And then walked away. But
I knew someone who, she hit her head on, like, a fireplace mantle. This was at an event. And the first thing out of her mouth was, oh, help me, Jesus. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if Jesus was helping you, you wouldn't have hit your head in the first place.
Exactly.
Exactly. So funny.
That is funny.
Just the knee jerk. I mean, oh, praise the Lord that God brought my mittens back. But there's children starving and everything.
Right, yeah, the trivial stuff. My sister, who's, get into it in further detail in my story, but she converted to, she's a born again. And I mean, she prays for, like, nail appointments, you know, that there could be an opening at the time slot that she could go to. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
That's hilarious.
It's crazy.
That's hilarious. So how did you arrive at your atheism, Adam?
Oh, you want me to go next? I was going to go last.
Okay, well, we can have Betsy. How about you, Betsy? How'd you arrive at atheism?
I basically didn't have a religious upbringing. We went to church when I was a tiny little kid, to some congregational church. And then my dad got mad because he felt like all the minister was doing is trying to get his money. And so basically we just stopped going. I don't think I was even out of kindergarten, because I have vague memories of going to some stupid little Sunday school class and having to draw little crosses. We had to make macaroni crosses one time, like gluing macaroni on. I just remember that stuff onto a piece of paper that was shaped like a cross. So then my entire childhood, we really didn't discuss God. My dad was a mason though. He was involved in masonry. Okay. So he had this concept of, like, the grand architect of the universe kind of thing. But he actually, if you pin him down, he just was involved in the Shriners and all that to drum up business for his law practice. I mean, it was kind of like his boss said, okay, we all join these because Shriners use other Shriners as doctors and lawyers, so we're all going to be Shriners. So it was basically a commercial endeavor. Oh, okay. And my mom was raised Episcopalian, but her dad also hated church. So none of them we weren't at all raised religious. But then in high school, I got dragged to Young Life by a girlfriend and got all involved in that and went to a Young Life camp my summer after sophomore year and got born again. And then, of course, started reading the Bible and preaching at my mom and dad and grandparents and all that crap. And then I went to college and completely fell away and was getting drunk and being a normal college person, but riddled with guilt. Like, I felt so guilty for just having fun in college. So after that, I moved to Florida to go to grad school. And at that point, my brother had become a really strong Christian, and he was kind of badgering me to get involved in church. And so I started going to church in Tallahassee when I was in grad school and went to like Campus Crusade for Christ, and then just got deeper and deeper into it. And then for like the next 10 years, I got a job at a Christian school, which was really a cult-like church in Jacksonville, like one of those early 80s Christian cults that was really controlling. And they had the shepherding movement, they called it, where they had this, remember that? And they had like a tier of pastor, like the head pastor, and then underneath that there were elders, and then there were small groups, and every church member had to be put into one of those groups. So you had this hierarchy of control over your life.
So what's the I mean, I've heard the word. What's the shepherding movement? What kind of a brief definition, I guess?
That you're basically being guided by the elderly people in church, especially if you're a new Christian. They just used it as a shepherd, like you're the sheep, and a shepherd over basically watches what you, sure that you don't fall away from God and all that.
Okay.
So, I mean, it goes back to Jesus being the ultimate shepherd, you know. And so they just gained more and more control. My whole entire life was involved in this church. And I was about 20, I think I started working there when I was 23. So I was still very young, 24 maybe. And, I mean, total slave labor. I mean, I taught school there. We had no support staff. So I basically had to clean my own room, you know, do everything. And I made $10,000 a year, literally. And I had a master's degree.
Oh, wow.
So it was
That's
just
not good.
And then they would guilt you into, you know, have these meetings where they needed to raise money for something. So they had mandatory meetings you'd have to go to, and there were chairs with your name on them, so that if you didn't show up, everybody knew that Betsy didn't show up for the fundraising meeting. And so then they would try to extract more money out of this measly little paycheck. Basically, at one point, they were so low on funds that they called all of us teachers together and asked if there were any of us that could just work with no pay. And I was single, and I was like, no. I mean, our 2 roommates, and I'm barely able to pay for my gas, you know what I mean? It was, and no health insurance, no retirement, nothing. It was totally like really kind of like what the Scientologists do to people, but they're even worse. They don't let you leave the property.
Yeah.
So I stayed for 2 school years, and then I actually was kind of sick of it, and so started looking for another job, but looking through like Christian magazines for, you know, job, because I wanted to work in Christianity. Found another job in Dallas as a social worker for a Christian adoption agency, and I thought, oh my gosh, it said like faith or spirit-filled MSW needed, and I thought, God is talking to me because I am an MSW. I have a master's in social work, and this is God telling me. So then I went on this stupid next probably 6 years, were the worst years of my life, where I thought I was following God. I moved to Texas and got employed by this just horrible, tyrannical couple that ran this South American adoption agency. Once again, I was like the only employee, and and I made $15,000 a year. It was ridiculous.
Oh, wow.
And this is great. And I'm living in Dallas, of all places. I mean, you know, it's expensive to live in big cities. So, again, then I met my ex-husband at the church there. I literally was going to Bob Tilton's church. I mean, remember the Tiltons?
I've heard of it.
Them. They were those really lived like Jim and Tammy Baker kind of people.
Or like Joel Osteen does today.
I do remember him.
Remember Bob Tilton?
I do.
Yeah,
I do remember that.
If you look him up, you'll recognize him. And they preached like like prosperity. It was the prosperity movement. Like if you have enough faith, you will become prosperous. And it was like the word of faith prosperity movement. Of course, the only person that was living prosperous was the pastor.
Of course.
So anyway, and met my ex-husband, who was, of course, a fanatic too. And so we ended up getting married only 6 months later. And I knew that, like, the day after I married him, this is the biggest mistake I have ever made.
Oh no!
How did you? Well, of course, 6 months, but
Yeah, I mean,
but you came to some realization. I mean, all the way down this road here, if I can interrupt, because it's so fascinating.
yeah, I've never.
I recognize him.
But all the way down this road, you've met sordid individuals
Yep.
who were involved with religion. Like when you're saying these things, you don't have a good word to say about anyone except perhaps you didn't really go into detail about the person in high school who got me into recruited to begin with, and that's what I wanted to go back to.
Oh.
What was going on in high school at the time that you said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do this"?
Well,
Yeah.
It was just social. I mean, lots of kids went to Young Life, and Young Life itself was kind of fun. I mean, that's how youth groups are. You go and you do fun stuff, and you're with all the kids from your classes. A lot of kids. I mean, there were probably 30 or 40 kids from my high school that were going to Young Life. And so it was one of my best friends that I met there, and she and I started going, and I don't know. That wasn't, but when we went to the ranch out in Colorado for that like week, that was where the pressure started. Like in the high school, they aren't so bad, and that's part of the recruitment process. They get you hooked in, then they take you away to an intensive week of indoctrination, and then they have the meetings where at the end they have the altar call, and they talk about how you're sinners, and and then kids stand up and get born again, and so it's a planned process of indoctrination.
So do you think if you hadn't done Young Life and you hadn't gone out to Colorado, those two things, do you think that you would have found religion anyway?
Because my brother did, for some reason. He got involved in it. And it was just that, I don't know. I think the fact that we weren't raised understanding religion, I did not know. In third grade, I didn't know that, like, why Jesus even died on the cross. I had no idea what that was all about. So, I mean, I got to be like 8 years old and had never even understood what was Easter. We got bunnies and eggs and chocolate. We didn't talk about the resurrection at Easter.
Yeah.
But I got in a big argument with a kid in my third grade class who was Jewish, and he said that Jesus was a Jew, and I was like, no, he isn't. He was a Christian. I mean, that's how little I knew.
Isn't it amazing how Heather's story and your story, I mean, you came from a family that was really not very religious.
Secular. We were very secular.
And yet, you
went
found religion.
I know.
And then Heather's story, just the opposite. She came from her father was a fairly religious person, right? And then she broke away from it.
I know it. Isn't it ironic?
Yeah.
But I don't know. My mom they were worried because my brother and I both got involved in really heavy-duty fundamentalist groups. And actually, my sister then followed us. So all three of us, within the same college to grad school era, and we're only all about, like, all of us were born within 4.5 years. My mom had all of us, like, really fast. Mm-hmm. So all of us became just rabid, fanatical Christians. And I know my parents and grandparents were like, well, they didn't say it this way, but like, what the fuck happened?
Right?
Isn't that amazing? The older generation is saying to the younger generation, what are you guys doing?
That's my grandparents with this Bible, and on it said "The Way." It was an old, like, 80s version. And it was just like a New King James version.
I remember that one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember it was paperback.
Yep.
And my grandma saw it, and there was actually a cult out there called The Way. My grandma pulled my mom aside and was, what is she doing with that book? That's a cult. My mom's like, it's the Bible. So they were working.
Right.
And so then I had my back injury in 1988. I was still teaching at that school.
Got a little echo here. I just want to.
Let me stop for a minute.
Do you have your earplugs in or headphones?
Yeah. Okay, now it's gone.
Yep, now you sound good again.
Yep.
You were kind of fading in and out
It's happened periodically throughout this. Have you noticed it, Adam?
Yeah, like here you fade in and out a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. so that when I had my back injury, of course, God was supposed to heal that. And over time, it just got worse and worse and worse and became chronic pain in spite of everyone telling me that God wanted me healed and all this. And that's really what led to the downfall of my faith. It's that this cannot be what God wants for my life.
Right.
And so long story short, I only was married 4 years, and by that time, I was just like getting disillusioned with everything in life. So I quit my job. I just bailed. I just bailed on everything and called my mom and said, I want to move back home. I'm leaving. And so she came and got me.
Nice.
and I took my 2 dogs and left. And then when I was up here, I was just so battered mentally from the whole 10 years of just this like a firestorm of horrible decisions. I mean, I won't go into all of it, but getting disentangled from the adoption agency employers, it's almost like getting out of a cult itself. They stalked me. They didn't want me to quit because they would lose their license because they had to have a social worker master's level to have their license in Texas. And so they jumped through a million hoops trying to manipulate me to not quit. And finally, actually, my husband at the time was like, she's quitting. I mean, she's quitting. Just listen to that. She's done.
Right.
Because they're not letting me go. So that was scary.
Yeah, I bet. That is frightening for sure.
Wow.
So
now, along the way, did you get a sense of these nefarious people, or did it really take you until you got out where you could look back on it and say, some of these people were real scoundrels?
Most of them, the adoption agency people, they were really, really bad. And actually, the rest of it, though, I had to get away from it because I was so indoctrinated that I felt like I was leaving. It's just like how anybody trying to leave a cult, they really believe that maybe I will go to hell, or maybe it's me. Maybe I'm not submitting enough. There's just that horrible mind control that always turns it back. It can't be the church. It can't be God, of course. It's you.
Right.
You're the one, and everybody else is conforming, although you know that thousands of people sitting in these churches are thinking the same thing I am, except nobody will rise up and do it publicly because you will be so ostracized. So it's funny that I don't think I'm rare. I think there's a lot of people still going to church that hate it and wish they didn't have to go.
Yeah.
But they just can't leave. They just won't go through what it takes to get out. But the fact that I left Dallas, a clean break is so much easier. Like I'm just going to start over. I'm leaving behind all these people and this entire lifestyle. And so really, when I moved back up to Illinois, I did go to a church for a while. And but my back was giving me so much trouble. Like I was working all week and I was in so much pain from sitting at my desk. I was working at the retirement home, and I just I'm not going to waste my Sunday going and sitting in a church. And so at that point I stopped going, and then started reading Michael Shermer. My brother he was a dentist, and he also has a master's degree in pathology, and his wife is a doctor. And so they were science people, and they met when they were both Christians, but slowly they just started to see it's bullshit. And so he actually became an atheist before I did. So I sort of followed my brother all the way through the whole thing, and now he's an atheist, libertarian. My sister is still a Christian, though.
Huh.
How old was your brother when he got out of it?
Well, he was still involved when he was in dental school. I mean, he played music in the church and all that. No, actually, they came back here and had their son, and I want to say he was probably 34 when he got out, and I was probably a year later than that.
Okay.
Did you ever, since you've gotten out, do you ever ask yourself, or did you ever ask yourself, how you could be so gullible, so foolish, so naive?
Yeah.
And what answer comes back when you ask yourself that?
I want people to like me, I think. I want to fit in. And I would have done that with any group, probably. I think whatever it was that I got involved in, I would have tried to be the best member I could have been. And I've only recently gotten so offensive.
Well, and how much of it do you think is
That's
probably...
a nice side of you. I like that. I like that offensive side.
I don't want to hurt people's
I always
feelings,
have.
but I guess just being that way, and I extricated from a terribly abusive friendship, which I won't go into all those details of a girlfriend.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, for 50 years we were friends. Our parents were friends, and just last February I axed the whole friendship, and she's still stalking me. But I took my power back. I'm not even going to take this from this girl anymore. Fuck you. And you know what I mean? Stop it.
Yep.
You're not going to bully me. You're not going to demand that I do things for you. And she wrote a Christmas card to my parents a week ago saying, I'm sorry that Betsy didn't feel that our friendship was genuine. I always did, and I will always care about her because I refused to speak to her. So now she's going to my parents trying to bully me back into letting her control. I mean, it's so ridiculous. But
and is she a religious person too?
Oh, yeah. She's super Christian, but she wasn't. I mean, she was like, not growing up so much. She was Methodist, but she has now gotten really religious in her adult years. So...
Yeah, one of my best girlfriends was like that too. She was never she believed in God, but she was never super religious, and we had a blowout probably about 3 years ago because of religion. And and instead of just calling me and talking about it like she should have, she sent me some shitty ass Facebook message.
Oh God, I hate people that do that.
And I blasted her big time, and I was basically like, you know what, have a nice life, we're done here. And you know, I cried over that one though, because she was like a sister to me. Her and my friend who's now, recently an atheist. Those were my two closest friends. Yep. And it was tough, but I was like, I'm done. But she just kept consistently getting more religious, and it was nuts. And I did kind of check her Facebook just recently, actually. I hadn't even looked at it in years, and I'm like, oh my God, she's so religious now. It's like, I'm so glad we're not friends anymore.
Yes, it's just...
we grew apart, really.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This wasn't because of her religion. This was just because she was as a narcissist and really a sick, controlling individual. I mean, she didn't really she knows I'm an atheist, and for some reason I was stronger on that part. Like she was afraid to challenge me on that too much. Mm-hmm. Because she doesn't have any logic to why she's a Christian. But it was more it was just who she was as a person that I couldn't take anymore, and the way she treated me. So actually my sister-in-law helped me with that, because we were going to Florida and I was reading something that she had posted or something she had sent me, and my sister-in-law was like, why are you even friends with her? Why do you let someone treat you like that? And I'm like, I don't know. It was sort of like you're right. And so that was the last time I ever talked to her, was in February, and but she can't stand it. But it was all process. I mean, my whole personality, even
you
from
took her control.
Complete.
You took her control. That's why.
And it's been a 20-year process of just becoming my own person and not having a religious group tell me how to live or what to do. Not, just not letting a husband, anybody. So
good
now
for you.
If I don't want to do something, fuck you. Yep. I mean, that's
word up.
And I don't have to tell you why I don't want to do it. That's
exactly. It's okay to say no.
I have to come up with a good, I don't want to do this, but it's because of this and this and this, and please accept that I don't want to do this, but there's all these good reasons. Now I don't need a reason. Yeah. I'm an adult.
Exactly.
Adults don't get to tell other adults what to do.
So you're very aware of your own personal growth over the years.
Yes, and I've been through therapy. I mean, I went through counseling for 2 years, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, to deal with the chronic pain and just things that go along with that.
Right.
But my personality that goes along with just all those things. So I've grown I'm not afraid to look at my faults too. And that's what most people don't want to look at, is how did I make these choices? Nobody's at fault. I made the choices that put me in those situations, and then I need to know why, because otherwise I'll keep making them. That's the only way you can get free, is to take responsibility.
Well, we all make dumb decisions too.
Did you have feelings of guilt or anxiety when you got out of religion? Was there? So you just made a clean break and it felt free.
Yeah, and I've been angry about it for a long time, so I finally just allowed myself to be angry, that, okay, here I am, my life is so limited, and I'm better now, but back then, because of my back pain, and then how could God, if there is a God, why? I mean, there's no excuse for how my life has evolved with my physical health. And but you're not allowed to be angry at God. So that had all been squelched for years and years. And so finally I could just be mad. So
Right,
I
you had
did not
mentioned-
have guilt. When I stopped believing, I mean, when I read that Michael Shermer book called How We Believe, and I understood that religion is a process of the brain and the culture, and that it doesn't even exist, then I was just completely like free. That book literally saved my life, and I always recommend it to new Christians.
Is that why
want
people
strength.
believe strange
Well,
things?
Yeah,
Right.
why people believe weird things is this
Yeah,
second.
strange. Yeah,
But
weird or
the first
strange.
one was the most powerful one. Is like how we believe, and that's what is the process by which people believe these things.
So I remember in the previous podcast you said that you did a lot of praying
Yes.
in your day.
Oh,
And
yeah.
whatever, whether it was for, praying that your pain would go away or
Praying for
whatever,
everything.
for whatever else. So I don't know if you agree with this, but in order to pray, you need something to pray to. So you need a God.
Mm-hmm.
Once you give up the God, there's no need to pray at that point because there's
Exactly.
nothing to pray to.
And you have so much more time in your day to do fun things.
That's a good
prayer
point.
is
That's
a
a good point.
drudgery. I hated praying, and I hated reading the Bible, but I was so ritualized, and I still am. I work out. I'm very regimented in my personality, kind of. But I would get up at like 5 a.m. every day and pray and read the Bible and pray for an hour. I've read the Bible all the way through probably 30 times because I would just start at the beginning, read it through, start over, read it through, start over, read it. I never stopped.
Wow.
And so once I didn't have to do that, it was like, hey, it's like a weekend every day. I can watch all my children. That was something I had to give up. I was like a big soap opera addict starting in like 1975. But of course, Christians can't watch those adulterous, terrible soap operas. And so the first thing I did when I got divorced and came back up here was I started recording all my children every day and watching it when I got home from work.
That was my mother's favorite soap opera. For years.
Oh, and then they went and canceled it, damn
Yeah,
it.
I know. She loved it.
Erica Kane, you can't beat Susan Lucci for being the soap star.
Well, she was on that series from beginning to end, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Yes, she was.
Like the only
Yep.
cast member that was
Like,
that.
yeah, like 30 years or something, yep. So
Yeah.
I didn't have any grief about leaving the church, none. So I can't really relate to people but my family wasn't involved, and that does make a big difference.
Yeah.
It probably made it easier to an extent.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they were relieved, too, that I was out of it. But now that I'm an atheist, I can't talk about being an atheist to my mom because now she says, I still kind of wish that you believed in God. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. Just not to the extent that you did before.
Exactly.
That's all.
Like, she's worried.
They're always
She's
worried. They're always worried you're going to go to hell. That's my dad's fear. He thinks
I agree.
He worries I'm going to go to hell. And it's like, well,
It's also you don't want to attract negative attention.
No.
And since most people in this country are Christians, your family probably just wants you to be a Christian if you come from a Christian family because, hey, it's easier. Just it doesn't create conflict.
Right.
That's
That's right. Agree. And my mom just thinks that it is a source of comfort for her to have some just very vague idea of God. It goes back to that, we like to have the comfort of a parental figure that we feel is watching over us, even though it doesn't matter that much in what you do day to day, but that's how she is. She does believe in God and in heaven, but if you press her on it, she gets all anxious, like she can't explain, okay, well then what happens? Does everybody go to heaven? Does Hitler go to heaven? You can't do that with my mom because she'll just get all anxious and upset. So I just don't talk about it. There's just no reason to. She's almost 80. It doesn't matter at this point.
My mom's probably got the same approach, I guess.
But she thinks and it does bring comfort to people. I think that's the main reason why they believe is for comfort. And you can debate whether that's right or wrong. It's maybe harmless if they don't take their religion too far beyond that.
Oh yeah, comfort plays a whole. Comfort is probably one of the main reasons why anyone latches on to a given ideology that they have.
You're right.
There's always consequences to a belief, no matter how false it is.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of my long-winded story, but it had a lot of twists and turns.
Yeah, it did. That's interesting, though.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
It took me a while, and I've looked up those church people at the original church in Jacksonville. Like, I kind of have looked on their Facebook page and stuff, and they're still at it. It was a married couple that started it in like the late 70s, and they're still there, same location. And I just look at all the people involved. I mean, and there were like a couple thousand members. It was a big church. I mean, in the South, as you know, Adam, the churches are huge.
Right. Mega churches.
Yes, they are.
But I'm Facebook friends with quite a few people that were involved in that church that were my friends, like teachers that I worked with at that school. And one of them has discovered like that I am no longer a believer. So she started messaging me every morning, little religious things like Bible verses and little stupid little guidepost shit. So I ended up having to block her from messaging me. I'm not going to talk about it with these people. I'm not going to let them start trying to witness to me because they all know, they think I'm backslidden, blah, blah. And I don't want to, I can be their friends on Facebook. There's no reason not to, but if they start up, they get blocked because I'm not going that road.
Don't blame
Have you discovered anyone else who's left the church or stopped believing?
There is one gal that was a really good friend of mine that was the second grade teacher, and I was the third grade teacher, and she ended up she was married to one of the missionaries, and she's now divorced and lives in like Washington State. And I know she's not a fundamentalist anymore because just from things she's posted, but I don't think she's an atheist. I haven't really gone down where I talked to her about it yet, but I can tell she's not where we used to be, as far as the extreme.
Right.
But the rest of them, some of the kids that were in my class are now like in their 30s, and I'm Facebook friends with some of them, and they were like 8, and 2 of them who were like the most brilliant kids married each other. They were in my 3rd grade class, and they got married, and they are like, they have their big fundamentalist podcast, and they're missionaries in Africa, and I just think, God damn it, I played a role in indoctrinating these poor kids.
Yeah, I was going to ask that, how you feel about that.
I feel horrible about it. I mean, I really feel, that's the only thing I probably feel bad about is that I participated in the child indoctrination. And we used corporal punishment. So I beat those kids with a paddle when they were bad. And I feel...
But you know what? If it wasn't you, it would have been someone else.
And their parents put them there. I mean, their parents wanted that for them. They would have been there whether I was there or not. Mm-hmm. So, but man, those Christian schools are really bad. I mean, I know how bad the evolutions, I mean, from the creationism to the twisting every kind of historical thing to fit the Bible, it's bad.
Yeah.
That is a powerful story.
It was. Very much so. Well, I'm glad you found your way out, Betsy.
Oh, I am too.
Yeah, because you're a good person to have on our side.
Yes.
It really helped me deal. I mean, I still have pain issues, but now there's nobody to blame. I got a bad genetic draw, of my back issue. And I don't have to be angry about it because, my sister's friend just died of MS, which she got at 19. Bad things happen.
Yeah.
So what? You just have to live the best you can.
Exactly.
There's no bigger and just not thinking that there has to be a higher reason for things that happen is so liberating.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree with you.
That is just...
It is. It's very liberating because you're not a prisoner to all that and
and you don't spend hours wasting time thinking about why did this happen to me.
Exactly.
Just because. You can think, well, hey, you didn't get run over by that truck yesterday. That didn't happen.
It's kind of luck of the draw. Yeah.
It is. And so why that is like such a horrible way to live, I don't understand why people think that that's just so sad to live that way.
You were like, no, we're not sad, we're free.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right, I don't want to ramble too long even.
Yes, while we're doing testimonials and all, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I should go around to like free-thinking churches and give my witness. You know how Christians do that?
Right.
They stand up and give talks about it. We could go around saying like, here's how we got free from religion.
Aw.
All right.
Well, people are doing it every day. People are leaving the church.
Yep.
This is not like things used to be in the 80s with the moral majority and the religious right. So different.
It
from
really
then.
is.
So, Adam, I guess that leaves the two of us for our little history.
Yeah,
personal
how do
history.
you want to do this? Do you want to go?
I would go.
I'll go last, and we can.
I'll go just because
we
it's
can
very
do it
brief.
next week.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, we might want to wait till next week just because we're
Yeah,
already
almost
at the.
five.
It's up to you guys.
Yep, because we're already at the hour and a half mark for recording, so I like to keep them about an hour and a half or so. But then that would be good. We can pick that up next week. That'd be great. And then we can also like find another. I think, Adam, it would also be your turn to pick a video or topic you'd like to discuss as well.
Oh, I thought this was my turn, so we're just carrying it over until
Nope.
we finish. So,
we could do that.
I didn't know that. I
You
thought it
can't
was.
springboard off of my thing, but that was mine, Hitchens.
Oh no, I thought we went from Hitchens to this.
Oh,
Yeah.
this was your
personal
idea.
stories, and this was my choice. The
It was.
personal
Oh,
stories.
gotcha. Oh, yeah, that's
so
right.
we're just
It
going to
was.
finish those next week. So we probably will need another topic
Yeah.
for next week.
I'm always a big fan of current event potpourri. So you and I, Adam, we can kind of have our little personal histories that we'll go into as far as how we became atheists, and then I guess we can all keep an eye on the news and make suggestions for little topics that we can discuss. Because if nothing else, it's a good frame of reference when people listen to these episodes. If and
Right.
I think some of them are. I know Kerr and Kemp listened to ours, he told me.
he did.
Cool. Well, hey, let me go ahead and end the recording quick. All right, so that was another good one, and we'll see you next week.